Welcome to the Art of Consulting podcast with Andy Fry and Cat Lamb. We are seasoned IT consultants, CPAs, and professional development connoisseurs. Each episode, we bring you an inspiring message to help you discover that X factor as a professional in your field so that you can gain the success that you know you deserve in your career and in your life. Right. It's been a while. Again, it's July. How does that even happen?
Yeah, the time goes by quick.
They say time goes by when you're having fun. Are you having fun?
Always.
Always. Cool. Right. So today we're talking about this key thing that you and I were just discussing earlier that you must do, even if you have your targets set, even if you've got a plan to do it. But if you really don't have this thing, then you're just never going to make it.
Right.
Right. So what is that thing? Or do you have a story to tell, or how do you let's get into it?
Yeah, well, this kind of prompted a thought, probably about a number of weeks ago, my daughter was playing in the pool and she was on kind of a little floaty thing, and she had her eyes closed and she's kind of playing, and she asked me, she goes, Dad, am I going straight? So I said to her, well, where were you coming from? And she said, well, am I straight? And what I realized was I have to make a decision on, is she straight compared to what? Right. And so as I started to ask the question, it prompted me with the thought that people will say, how do I get here, wherever here is, or how do I get to point B? But then the question is where's point A? Where are you at?
Yeah.
Because we don't know in that situation. I couldn't tell my daughter if she was pointed straight or not, because I didn't know what direction she was coming from. Now it's a small pool, but the point is that, where to her is straight and where to her is not straight. And, I'm dealing with a 7-year-old, so it's a little bit of a different, perspective, but adults are the same way, where, they want to get to a goal, they want to get somewhere, and they're asking someone for help, or they're saying, hey, how do I get there? Well, really the first question is where are you at?
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing. We've talked to a lot of people who have approached us. Hey, can you help me get to this, set up a business, or, become self-employed and get a contract, and they're not really it depends on, you're absolutely correct. It depends on where you are starting. And it's like anything though, right? If you're, and I always draw. So you always make dating references. I always make fitness references. So it's like if you're going to start a new fitness program, well, your fitness program is going to be vastly different depending on where you begin. Right. If you were, for example, at all, right? So, and then of course, the plan to get there is going to differ dramatically. And it's not to say that you would have more ground to cover. You may have more ground to cover if you haven't ever worked out versus if you were, if you're just relying on muscle memory to bring it back, right? Yeah. So I really, really get your point. How do people sort of figure out where they begin or where they're at?
One thing is to take a real inventory of where they're at and what they have around them, the supports around them. I think that Hollywood if I go to a Hollywood movie, they kind of glorify these movies of someone who's starting over. And you can picture these movies, where it's a single mom, she's going back to school, she hasn't worked, or she's going to start a business. And, the Julia Roberts character or the Reese Witherspoon character, the lovable person who goes, and they may not have all the supports in place, and they have all these struggles, and they're fighting through this. And at the end, it all kind of comes together. And that's a nice Hollywood story. The fact is that when someone's going to undertake something, they have to really look around and say, okay, first of all, where am I at based on where I want to be? So as a consultant, it might be, okay, how much experience do I have? What education do I have? What projects have I worked on? What skills do I have? And actually build an inventory of that, write those things down, write down all the things, and really be honest with where they are. It's using your fitness example, the person who steps on the scale and then lies about their weight, right? They're not going to get the same result, which is one of the reasons why fitness instructors weigh somebody when they come in. They do the measurements, they do all that themselves, because they want to say, look, I need to know where you're at, because do we push you too hard and possibly hurt you, set you back? Or do we, can you take more?
Or make you quit.
Right. That's right. That's right. Or are we not pushing you enough? Are we asking too much? Or are we asking too little? Where does it fit? And so I think for somebody, they have to look at that when they're a consultant, look at their skill set. I think then they have to also look at what resources are available to them. What supports do they have in place? How much money do they have? Where do they live? What are the clients around them? All that kind of stuff. Now, that seems like a big, huge undertaking, but really some of that stuff should already be done. Things with their resume. We already know what supports we have in place, just inherently knowing, what our spouse is like, how many children we have, who lives in our home, all those sorts of things. We're aware of those things, what our in-laws are like, or our family, because those sorts of things, we just have to get that down on paper. We know that if we have, let's say, a very large family, or we have, let's say, a child who needs special care, we might need other resources to come and help us if we're going to go out on our own and start doing our own project. Now, when I say all these things, it's not to scare someone away and say, hey, I can't do it. It really is to say, okay, where am I at? And if I use the analogy, fitness analogy is a good one, but if we tell somebody, their goal is to go to Wrigley Field in Chicago, right? The first question is where are you? Are you 2 blocks away? Right? Can you walk there? Are you 2 blocks away, but are you in a wheelchair? Right? What is the situation? Is it snowing? Is there a blizzard? Right? Is there, a riot going on out in the streets? All these different things have to take in, we need to know what the situation is, so that we can make the right decisions to get where we're at. And if you live in Atlanta, you got a different route than someone who lives in Los Angeles. So
absolutely. It's like you're booking a flight. It's funny because I'm just literally booking flights like 5 minutes prior to talking to you. But, we're going to Las Vegas, and very much depends on where you begin. Like, that's a key part. That's 50%. That's 50%.
That's right.
Right? Mm-hmm. To identify. And it's so funny because everybody is like, oh, okay, where do you want to go? Identify your goals. Be clear about your goals. Have put utmost detail into what you want to visualize. And certainly we do that as well. Mm-hmm. But we're doing that with the assumption that we already know where we are today.
Right.
Right. And chances are we do, but it's a difference of knowing, like, in your head it's actually about 50%. Like, if you are not identifying where you are beginning, in addition to where you want to be, that's like you've lost half the plan.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons I think this is important for people in IT is that, I don't mean just IT, it is important for everybody, but people who have worked in IT, when I started, in consulting, that goes back to 1997. And most of the methodologies had a stage in the methodology called the current business baseline or current business state. They had different names. And what would happen is you'd spend a couple of weeks working with the client to say, where are you currently at? Mm-hmm. What ended up happening was a lot of the IT companies just scrapped that stage of the implementation. And I remember when they scrapped it, a lot of different companies would say, well, we don't need to know that because we're going someplace different. Tell us where we're going. And at the time, I kind of thought, yeah, you're right. But as I got more experienced, I started to realize, wait a second, where you're at is critical to knowing where you're going to go. Because those steps around what are you doing, where are you at, isn't just around saying, okay, how do we start putting in this new software system? It's around what skills do we have? What do our people know? What business processes in place that we haven't even considered? And I think for people, it's the same thing if we're not doing that analysis around where we're at. And I think we should be doing this at least twice a year. I really do. And I think, and we talk about that at year end when we before we kind of lead into the goal setting at the beginning of the year, usually January 1st, the end of December, early January is when people do a lot of their goal setting. I think that people really should do a review of where they're at, because I think that's the other challenge with North America is that, and maybe, Western Europe is the same way, but this idea of constantly trying to get to the next thing and achieve the next goal and not really celebrating where they're at, or even doing a review and realizing, wait a second, we may have had a setback. But we can, we need to replan from here and move forward.
Ever going to need it whatsoever, right? So identifying what that starting point is so key to, to booking a flight, to identifying what your as is process is. Starting points are a key to, we said that it was at least 50% of the piece of the puzzle, that you can't just have that to be state, right? Like you have to have an as is state. And part of business analysis, like a huge part of business analysis that you start off with, is to identify what that as is situation is, right?
Right.
And only after you have identified what that as is situation is, and then you have the to be, can you actually create the delta, which is your gap analysis. Like that's like elementary business analysis, right? And so the question is, well, why aren't we applying these very sound corporate concepts to our lives? We absolutely should be. Right. But the thing is that most of us are just like so focused on the to be. So yeah, so that's like, I drew a lot of parallels from the business analysis work that we would need to do. And this is funny. It's like we keep dropping off what is going on here.
I know.
But anyways, yeah. So you're going to take something from this talk. Here's what you need to take. You need to take inventory before you, in addition to where you want. And I would say greenfield. You guys know what I mean by greenfield? Like blue sky, visualization. When you're conceptualizing a new system, you always want to, what happens if you can have anything on the face of the earth or anything in the universe in your life? And that's very, that is goal setting, right? Often we have problems identifying everything that could possibly happen in our life, because the fact of the matter is anything can happen, right? Want to attract in our lives is there is absolutely every possibility that we want, that we have, that we can have in our lives. It's just that we need to identify what that is with utmost detail. So that's step one. Step 1A. I don't know if you want to do this like before or after, but equally as important, we need to identify and take note and take inventory, as Andy said, as to what that, like where we are today, right? Mm-hmm. And what did he say? He said, take an inventory of your skills. What sort of skills, what sort of know-how, what sort of marketable skills do you have today? And if you're working for somebody right now, it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, that's part of the fear, right? Like, oh, I don't know if anybody is going to pay for my skill set in the marketplace. Well, somebody already has, because if you have a job, if you are employed by somebody, that means they needed your skill. Like they didn't just give you a job out of the kindness of their heart to bring you into their company. They marketable skills. And so it's the identification of what those skills are and how much experience, like how much are you an expert in what you are contributing to your company through your skills and through your expertise. Take note of that. And far too few of us are, some of us are delusional, I get that, but most of us are actually too modest with identifying what we can contribute to an organization.
Right.
And I was like this myself. I think that it's important to obviously not be delusional, but it's also important to give ourselves the credit where we deserve. Like what is the value that we have created in our organization? Without us, what is, like, these are key questions that you need to be asking yourself. Like, what sort of, if you did not exist in that organization, how would that organization be worse off? Right? These are the questions that you need to ask yourself when you're taking inventory of that starting point and where you are beginning, right? So skills, how much of an expert you are in those skills. And I mean, I wrote down the word tests, and I don't remember why I wrote down the word tests, but these are very key to helping you map out what that plan is to where you want to go. And as Andy mentioned, what those keys are to motivate you to stay on track, right? So I invite you to identify more than just like what you're doing in your job as a starting point, right? So you got your skills, you got your experience, but one of the things that we get people to do in our program is figure out what they need to live. Like, how, if you don't know how much money you are spending on a monthly basis to uphold your life, or withhold, or not withhold, but like make your life continue living, you don't have a good, that's very much part of that starting point. Like, you got to identify all of these things and identify what those resources are. Like, what do you have available to you? And if you're part of this group and you're part of this page, you obviously have us available to you. I mean, we won't work with everybody, but like, you can, this is the whole entire purpose of this page, of this group, to help you get to where you want to go. And so I think we should wrap up, because I've got an 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
But so we actually just released some new training not too long ago, actually. And so we invite you to take a look at that new training. It's not for new graduates. If you just came into the industry, I mean, whether or not you came out of school is sort of irrelevant, but we can't work with everybody. If you have been in the industry for a few years and it is something like going out on your own is something that you aspire to do, I invite you to take a look at that webinar, like take a look at that online training. And at the end of that training, you will have the opportunity to book a call with us or with our enrollment team. And what we're going to do is we're going to get on the phone with you for about 45 minutes, and we're going to help you explore what that starting point is and where you want to go. So we'll do an as-is exercise and a to-be exercise, and figure out what exactly you need to do to get to where you want to go. And if we feel that we can help you and we can be of value, we'll certainly share with you what those next steps are. But I invite you to do that. Explore what you need to do to maximize your life. Like, you're only here on this earth once. And it's not to say, oh, YOLO, you only live once. So like, but you know what? You only live once. So if you're not maximizing your life and optimizing your life right now, you are wasting it, plain and simple. So again, that's artofconsultingpodcast.com/call. And we will see you on the call.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. If you like what you heard and are interested in seeing if you'd be a great fit to work with Cath and myself, then head on over to artofconsultingpodcast.com/call. That's artofconsultingpodcast.com/call, and book an appointment to speak with us. We'll talk with you for about 45 minutes, and we'll get you clear on 3 things: putting together a solid game plan to start as an independent IT consultant, getting complete control over your career and time, and commanding the salary that you always wanted. Remember, developing and building a great consulting business does not happen by itself. You need an expert advice and guidance to make it happen. And we're 20+ year veterans in the independent IT space while enjoying life and delivering unparalleled service to our clients. To see if we can help you do the same, head on over to artofconsultingpodcast.com/call. I'm Andy Fry.
I'm Kat Lamb.
And let's talk soon.